And Barry was there a moment ago and he's disappeared now. Barry Smith was there.
Yes, he was. He should be able to come back. And Jan's disappeared.
You need to move the screen, Ginny. If you move the screen, slide the screen. Sorry, I'm on the iPad. You slide the screen, all the rest, because you're on the iPad, you only get 8, 9 at a time.
Well, I've got 14, but I haven't got Barry anymore. And he was.
Barry seems to have.
One at a time, please, ladies and gentlemen. We are on YouTube now.
Can I just. Right, I think we should start. I think we'll try and.
Please, ladies and gentlemen. We are on YouTube now.
Can I just. Right, we're getting quite a lot of feedback. Let's get stopped. Right, we're getting quite a lot of feedback. Let's get stopped. Right. Can I just say we're getting a lot of feedback now. There's very few of us have not been muted. So I don't know where it's coming from. That's better. It seems to have stopped. It might be you, Carl. Anyway, let's start now. I think we should. Basically, I'm Councillor Andrew Hutton, Chairman of the Budget and Policy Committee. I will now ask members present to indicate by a physical show of hands that they can hear the proceedings. So if you're on the audio, I'll come back to you in a minute. Can everybody just put their hands up, please, to make sure they're hearing? Okay, thank you. I presume that includes Jan and Carl as well. I'm now going to take a roll call of committee members who are voting members. So we start with the committee who are voting. So that's Harry Smith, Leslie Crawford, Anne Johnson, Paul Ward, Amanda Ewings, Paul Williamson, and myself. Yes, that's the committee. And now other members that are present are Graham Parker, Virginia Parker, James Ellis, Ursula Mann, Jeff Moody, and Barry Smith. Okay. Councillors and officers are asked to ensure that they have included their name against their thumbnail video so they can be clearly identified by viewers. Well, everybody's got the name. Thank you for that. In accordance with the normal practice on each matter that falls to be considered by the committee, I shall give opportunity for councillors of the committee to speak first before giving an opportunity to ward members who wish to speak. Members who wish to speak are asked to use the Zoom raise hand facility. I'll ask non-committee members not to raise a hand until I've invited them to do so after the committee members have spoken. Does everybody know how to use the raise hand facility? Does that? Yes. Basically, at the bottom of the screen, if you click on the sort of black surround around all the pictures of everybody, there is something that says reactions on. And if you press on the reactions, you will get a raised hand and a thumbs up. So if you do a raised hand, I'm doing one now, that will appear, and that basically will be there for a few seconds, and then I can make a note of who's done it, and then I'll ask you to speak. It will disappear after a little while. All right, so is everybody happy they know how to use it? I'm assuming that means yes. Okay. The quorum for the Budget and Policy Committee is 3. May I remind councillors and the public that the documents for this meeting are available on the council website. Please note that members are asked not to use the shared documents facility in this meeting. Graham Parker has still got a hand up. I don't know why. Do you want to speak, Graham, or does your hand not disappear? Okay.
It's not disappeared. It's gone now, yeah.
It has. In addition, may I remind you to stay muted until called to speak and to remute once you've spoken. When I call you to speak, I'll state your name. In the interests of transparency, try not to use the comments facility to communicate during the meeting other than with myself in the open forum. In no circumstances should be used for sort of private discussions. Voting will either be assent of the members of the committee or by a roll call vote. For roll call members, we're asked to state either for, against, or abstain when asked. Hopefully we won't need to do that very often because it will be quite difficult. If a councillor declares an interest, they will temporarily be removed from the meeting until the matter has been resolved and then readmitted. And when the public part of the meeting concludes, there'll be a brief adjournment of 10 minutes to enable councillors to basically then log back on with the second Zoom meeting, which they got on the same email that they've got on this one today. So that will be about 10 minutes after, just so we then go into the part 2. Okay, everybody, so now I think if you all understand that, we can start the meeting properly. Welcome, everybody. It is good to see so many of you. This is the first formal business meeting of the council since the pandemic started, and I feel it important that we all need to get some idea of where the council is financially, and I think that all of us need to be involved in how the council now goes forward. I know several of you and members of the public have been concerned that for the first few weeks of the pandemic, the town council seemed to have gone to sleep and was not interested in what was going on. I know that the officers and some of the staff were working home hard and they're involved in a lot of planning, and I thank them for that. However, the message certainly didn't get through to, I think, the people in Tavistock that the council was working, and we really need to change that perception. In the last 3 weeks, councillors and officers have been in the press and on Facebook, etc., discussing what the council is still doing and how it'll help the town go forward. And this stream of information has got to continue. We've got to show the town that we want to get involved in what's going to go on in the future. The town council has some statutory duties that it must be involved in, such as looking after the cemeteries. But as we go forward, it must be involved in much more. By that, I do not mean, for example, that it should tell BID what to do, but as representatives of the people of Tavistock being involved in these organisations, showing interest in what these organisations are up to and trying to help them go forward is what we should be doing. We then are in a position to tell the town what's going on. Many of us promised in our election manifestos to help get the town residents involved in what was going on. And this is an obvious opportunity after lockdown to get them involved. It's because of this general involvement that I have an agenda item on the BID survey and a more general item for us all to discuss how together we can help the town move forward. I hope that the town council, the officers, the councillors, the town's tradespeople, the town residents can all go forward together as lockdown restrictions are slowly eased. And I'm sure that our council can do its bit. So I think we can start first by agenda. Apologies for absence, please.
We have none, sir.
Okay, thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Now, the last proper meeting of this committee was the 18th of February, which I think you all will have had the meeting minutes a long time ago. Are there any accuracy points or points that anybody wants to bring up? Nobody seems to put a hand up, so I'm assuming that everybody's happy with that. So at some stage then, Mr. Carl, Dr. Williamson. Dr. Williamson, sorry. Councillor Paul Williamson. I can't hear you, Paul. I think you need to unmute yourself, please.
I'll do it again. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
I made a manuscript note on the minutes going back into prehistory BC before coronavirus. Met on the 26th of February under item 347 of those minutes, working together in the interests of Tavistock. It's so long ago. Ah, yes, I remember. I've got notes in my diary. I'm not going to go into them. We met at Kilworthy Park. Hutton, Johnson, Williamson, Smith, Jones, Hipsey, Ewing, Sellis, Pettigrew, Southall and Hearn. You probably remember it, Andy, but of course it's in the dim and distant. And at that meeting, we talked about a lot of things, and I've got notes to that effect. I don't know if the clerk wants to comment about whether that meeting was ever minuted and fed back to council or not. I've got notes on it, but I'm not going to go into them here.
If my recollection is correct, and I'm happy to be corrected by colleagues, I think that was the one where Mr. Tom Jones was of the Borough Council was taking the notes as the convener of the meeting, and I think we had 2 action points come out of that, but we haven't actually had detailed notes.
Okay, yes, I mean, that was a meeting very much suggesting that we all do things together, wasn't it? And then the pandemic happened. Councillor Ewings, I think, wishes to speak. Unmute yourself, please. Remember, for this meeting, you're all staying muted, apart from me and the clerk. And when you want to speak, I'll ask you to speak, and then you've got to remember to unmute yourself.
Just before other members sort of say anything, and I saw Councillor Parker indicated, and he probably wants to say the same thing, that Mr. Tom Jones is no longer with West Devon Borough Council. He left last week.
Oh, that's not very clear, Mandy. We heard what you said, but for some reason you weren't clear. That might be better.
I said better. That Mr. Tom Jones, as of last Friday, left West Devon Borough Council. He's gone into private partnership with his brother over Torbay Way. I think he said we can still find him. So yes,
Right,
just to update our officers and members.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parker, Mr. Parker, please.
Yeah, just a quick comment that following the meeting of the Budget and Policy in February,
Am I the only one that
actually build knowledge? So I think it's actually abused.
I think I'm not the only one, Graham. It's you're cutting out all the time.
Ah,
try again, please.
I'll try again. I commented on this, I think, in February, and I said I would check with Tom Jones as to whether he had produced any notes. When I did, he denied all knowledge and said he thought we were producing notes. So I'm not sure that anyone ever produced, Paul.
Thank you very much. Okay, no other comments. So are we going to accept these minutes, and I will sign them at an appropriate time? Are you in agreement with that? Yes, that seems general agreement. Okay, thank you. 3, declarations of interest. Basically, has anybody got any declarations of interest they want to make now about anything on the agenda? Or obviously, if they don't make them now, if they find something in the meeting that they suddenly realise that they should declare, then they please must make sure I'm aware of it. Has anybody got any declarations now? Oh, yes, Councillor Mann.
It's just I don't think it requires me to leave the meeting, but I did write one of the grant applications, which is on the Coronavirus Health Emergency Social Fund. So I just declare that I had participated in that fund.
Thank you. Nothing else, that's fine. Now, items for recommendation of council. I want to use Chairman's prerogative here. Rather than number 4, I want to start with number 7. It has been brought to my attention, I think correctly, that number 7 is about the conduct of meetings and how we behave with things like when you all become very disruptive and I have to get rid of you. And we probably ought to agree to this before we do the rest of the meeting. So I'd like to go, please, to agenda item 7, conduct of meetings. To the town clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If you wish to start there, then really what this is doing is setting out the amendments as proposed to your standing orders, which will enable legally compliant meetings to take place according to the coronavirus regulations. So you've got some proposed amendments in Appendix 1, and then you've got some explanatory notes in the further 2 documents. And we commend to you the changes as proposed, which will enable you to conduct your meetings electronically.
Okay, thank you. Have we any comments or thoughts? Yes, Councillor Harry. Councillor Smith, it's very hard remembering. You've all got names. You don't say councillors.
Okay, then. There's 2 points really addressed to the town clerk. I just wonder what the town clerk means in his report when he states that they try to cover the requirements for remote and mixed remote physical meetings. What would be, what does he visualize is a mixed remote and physical meeting? And I might as well say the second one while I'm on it, as everyone will be aware, we have a right to, as councillors, to call a meeting if the chairman refuses to call a meeting, provided we get the appropriate signatures. Within our standing orders, it states that the town clerk must circulate the agenda, for instance, for that meeting, accompanied by the signatures of both of the councillors who requested it. How would he propose to deal with that under the current situation?
Town clerk, would you like to reply to that? The town clerk seems to have vanished.
The town clerk is having some technical difficulties, and he'll get back as soon as he can.
Right. Anybody else? Any other comments? One thing that was brought up to me, Councillor Parker. You need to unmute yourself, please, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope I have done.
You have now.
Can people hear me? Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah, on March the 20th, we took a decision to, once the government had changed its regulations, which it now has, that the Budget and Policy Committee be granted delegated powers effectively to carry on all council business. I've got the resolution in front of me. It seems to me then that, particularly under number 1, annual meeting, that there ought to be a recognition of that in the resolution that that you're being asked to take today, so that where it says the requirement to hold an annual meeting, blah, 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 may only take place, 1, where called by the mayor, or 2, where called by Budget and Policy Committee, would reflect both the spirit and the letter of the resolution of March the 20th.
Okay, thank you. Carl, did you heard Graham's, did you?
I caught the back end of that, and I managed to catch some, I think, yes, of Councillor Smith's comments through Councillor Ellis's lines. So if I've misunderstood, please bear with me and please correct me. If I start with Councillor Parker's point, the question which arose in relation to the authority granted to Budget and Policy was the authority which was imbued in the council, which legislation said, which was not specifically and wholly reserved to the council as a council decision. The decision as to the decision to have an annual meeting is actually separately covered in legislation, and like the annual return, is something which only the council can make. Therefore, the Budget and Policy Committee cannot instruct that council will have an annual meeting. That will need to be a decision for the council meeting on the 23rd or 24th of June, as the case may be. And the reason for that is because it is specifically reserved to council within the legislation. So that's the only reason why. Otherwise, general duties that the council can do, he is absolutely right in his analysis on. I think Councillor Smith was asking in terms of, and please nod if I'm correct, in terms of notices of motion and number of signatures required. If members are agreeable, I think I would suggest that for the duration of social distancing specifically, that in those circumstances, we would accept an email from the individual councillor's email address as being an appropriate authorisation, if that's agreeable to colleagues.
Okay, is that answering the questions, gentlemen? Councillor Parker?
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow what the town clerk just said, because the regulations say where an appointment would otherwise be made or required to be made at an annual meeting of a local authority, such appointment continues until the next annual meeting of the authority or until such time as that authority may determine. It doesn't specify full council, it's clear that the decisions you're being asked to take today would override anyway anything in the regulations. I think it's clear that both the intention and the letter of the resolution on March was to grant, I'll read it out, the Budget and Policy Committee be designated to make such decisions as defined in paragraph A, and authority to be delegated to the committee for the duration of the state of emergency accordingly. And paragraph A just says, take such decisions as necessary to discharge the obligations of the council, blah, blah, blah. Now, it seems to me that that there are not just 2 routes, but 3 routes in this authority to call an annual meeting, and that one of them is clearly at the moment, and for the duration of the emergency, Budget and Policy Committee. Now, it also follows that the Budget and Policy Committee minutes will need to be ratified by full council anyway. So it may, in effect, make no difference, but it does seem to me that we ought to recognise that in your decision this evening.
I think this is where, Chairman, we run into the slight difficulty of taking things out of order, because the calendar of meetings item, as Councillor Parker has intimated, is the item which actually invites Budget and Policy to consider whether or not it wishes to resume, in inverted commas, the new normal operating arrangements, which would be reporting to Council. Therefore, if Council at agenda item number 4 decides it does wish to report to Council, then clearly it can express a view to Council as to how it would wish Council to proceed. I think what I'm saying is, because we haven't actually come to a view on that point yet, at this stage you are, as a committee, seeking to act outside of that and to make resolutions. And all I'm saying is that for matters which legislation reserves specifically to council meeting in full assembly, which is the annual meeting, that is not something where we can instruct by way of a resolution, council, on. You can, however, if you adopt what's recommended in item 4, make a recommendation to council that it should decide that there would be an annual meeting.
Right.
So it's the difference between, I know it sounds like semantics, but it's a key difference between being able to resolve and instruct council on a matter reserved to council and being able to recommend to council on a matter reserved to council.
Right. Does anybody else have a view? Graham Parker. You need to unmute yourself, Councillor Parker.
I will shut up after this one, but I still don't follow, because the item in the paragraph in this item sets forward 2 routes by which an annual meeting can be called. One of them is the mayor. Another is a resolution calling for an annual meeting being passed at an ordinary or extraordinary meeting of the council. I think what the town clerk has just said actually is encompassed by what I've suggested, what I'm raising, which is that budget and policy can also be a route by which that request can be made to council. So I think, in fact, we're on the same page, and those 3, there should not just be 2 routes, but 3. Yeah. And the second one should be a resolution of the Budget and Policy Committee requesting council to call an annual meeting. And that, I promise you, Chair, that's my last word.
Okay, so that seems reasonable. We've got delegated authority. But Councillor Harry Smith, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I thank the town clerk for his answer to the question, and I do think that emails sent from those requesting a meeting would be quite satisfactory under the circumstances, and I think that's the way forward. And I think Budget and Policy should agree tonight to that, because in the circumstances it would stop the necessity to get personal signatures on pieces of paper which I think at this time could be quite complicated. I hope that we don't have the situation where members are requesting a meeting, but if it did happen, then it's better to have it by electronic means rather than by physical means. I think, though, the town clerk missed the first part of my question, which was what the town clerk meant in his report by mixed remote and physical meetings. What would you envisage those to be?
Sorry, my apologies. Yes, I completely missed that. Essentially, the next piece of work which is going to need to be looked at, and which is starting to be looked at by nationally by the Lawyers in Local Government and Association of Democratic Services Officers, and also by the National Association of Local Councils, is what next as we move to what you might potentially call a hybrid meeting. So at the moment, we are not permitted to have physical meetings. In the past, we were not permitted to have virtual meetings. The question arises as we move through a period, assuming we do move through a period of unlocking lockdown, when we are again allowed to have assemblies. So in other words, we can again have physical meetings, but there may still be those who are unable to attend, for example, because they're shielding or other factors. What arrangements will be put in place for the duration of the coronavirus legislation through to 7th May next year, which will enable both those physical meetings to take place without disadvantaging or disempowering those members who are, for perfectly correct reasons, physically restrained or prevented from attending. So we are looking at that stage at a hybrid meeting, which will need to be something which will have the ability to have physical attendance in the chamber, remote attendance from councillors, and bearing in mind that the regulations, unless withdrawn beforehand, run till the 7th of May next year. Even if we went back to full physical meetings, my interpretation, and this is something which is somewhat contested nationally, but is that we will be in a position where we're still going to have to meet the regulations in relation to virtual meetings, both for councillors and for the public who wish to attend virtually, until those regulations are withdrawn, if indeed they are.
Okay. Okay, are you happy with that, Councillor Smith?
Yes, very happy, and happy to move any resolution that you want to take to cover this particular item.
Yes. Do you want to propose a resolution? Do we need one? Yes.
I think what we need is to say that we're happy with the reports as they're written.
Okay. Right. Are we all happy with that? This is obviously only can be voted on by members of the committee. Are the committee happy with that? Can you just place your hands if you're happy? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. At and up, Councillor Ewings. I think Councillor Humans wants to say something.
Yeah, I did ask to speak earlier,
Sorry.
but everyone was running around. Underneath the what we've just asked for, then, are we saying that we will keep, as we are with officers, with mayor, deputy mayor, etc., until May 2021? Or are we going to have a discussion? West Devon, I think, have decided they're going for 18 months. So going forward to August, and then in August, having somebody who then goes through to March 20. No, we're at 22, but sorry, it's all a long way hence, isn't it? But it's 18 months for each person. And the other question was, before we just do this, when we said about emails, we were told using our own emails. Does that mean that if we wanted to call for a meeting and we were using emails, that we can't use our council emails, and we have to use personal? Wasn't too sure as to what was meant by that.
Okay.
Council emails.
Thanks.
Sorry. An interesting saying, council emails, because I, for the last few days, have discovered that though I'm sending emails and pressing send and they disappear, in fact, they're all sitting in an outbox. And I don't know why. I've tried desperately to work out why. I can't do it, and I gather I'm not the only one. So there is, if we are using council emails, and we fully understand, I think that, you know, we should be not using our private email, we have got to somehow have a system that we can actually all use it. And I think we need to try and think about that. The second thing is that I was going to bring up annual meeting under under the meetings thing and about, because we've got to arrange meetings. So can we just drop that for a minute and come back to it? Do we have anybody want to bring any resolutions or suggestions on the committee about whether under the annual meeting we need to have the BP&C committee able to recommend anything? Or do we carry on as the clerk has already put in his report? Am I assuming that people want to carry on as the clerk has put in his report? Yes. Yes, I think that's agreed. So I think then, so are we basically prepared to accept the report the clerk has done for how we do the standing orders, amendments, etc. For these remote meetings? Can people indicate with their hands if they're in favour, please? I think that's yes. Okay, thank you. So then, now we've decided that, can we now go on to 4 calendar of meetings? Basically, obviously, the way we're doing Zoom meetings, providing we're all happy using it and we get more used to using it, and I think with time we will all get better. We now realize in the next year, probably for at least the next year, we probably are going to do most of our meetings, if not all, on Zoom. And so we're going to try and do a normal calendar of meetings, council meetings, BPC planning, and we need a calendar of meetings, which is enclosed and has been suggested by the clerk. We've also got to bring up the question of annual meeting as to what we want to do about it, because again, it's very much up to members what they want to do. Certain councils, I know that Plymouth Council have already had their annual meeting. They had that last week. West Devon, as Councillor Ewings has said, has decided to split sort of 3 years into 2, so that the present mayor carries on with the committees for 18 months, and then presumably at the end of November, beginning of December, carries on for the next 18 months. So that would basically bring us up to a period in another 2 years when we'll have had 2 teams of mayor, deputies and chairman of committees, etc. And then hopefully, and we're talking now, what, May 22, and hopefully we can be in a position where people carry on the normal yearly progression. So it's basically up to council to make decisions, but just for discussion, what do people want to do?
Chairman, can I just further make note? There are 3 main components to the report, one of which is to establish whether members are comfortable with the proposed calendar of meetings. The other one of which is to establish whether or not you are comfortable with the return of reporting to council, for council to be the final decision maker of all decisions. And the third one of which is brought forward at the request of the mayor to seek the views of colleagues regarding the proposed cancellation of the civic ball. So just so that everyone's aware that we've got those 3 elements, so which are picked up in the report, sir.
So we've got a few things to talk about. So first of all, should we talk about the calendar of meetings? Are people basically happy that we have a calendar of meetings? Yes, I think.
No, Andy,
sorry,
can I?
do you want to speak? Sorry, I think Councillor Parker, Virginia Parker, wants to speak.
The toilet subcommittee isn't mentioned on the calendar of meetings, and I've had a question from a member of the public about the public toilets. And obviously we stopped meeting and discussing the toilets at a rather critical point. Is there any plan to reconvene, obviously virtually, the toilet subcommittee in order that that work can be progressed? Because it's going to become quite a tricky issue if the cafes, etc., do begin to open, or even if they don't begin to open. This person who questioned me suggested that it's undoing the local business trade by people not being able to have access to the public toilets.
If I may, Chairman, I think there's 2 answers to that. The first answer is the ad hoc meeting, so whether that's the Public Conveniences Subcommittee or the Environmental and Sustainability Working Group, those are not listed on there because they are arranged on an as and when basis. So that's the reason why the calendar of meetings doesn't have those. We only have those which have a routine meeting schedule, if you like, and of course both of those don't fall within that category. In relation to public conveniences more generally, currently, they still sit subject to the decisions of the Borough Council with the Borough Council. And, you know, we are trying to work with the Borough Council, as you will see when we get later on the agenda, with regard to the reopening agenda. And I would certainly expect that to be part of the conversation that we have with them when we get to that stage. But at this point in time, the assets or the whether it's an asset or a liability, the premises actually legally sit with the Borough Council. And I think they've probably been rather inundated with their Category 1 responder responsibilities under the Civil Contingencies Act as they direct and control the relief effort in Tavistock and across West Devon Borough. So that's where we're at, but I'm sure it will form part of the agenda going forwards.
Thank you.
Can we be told when it does go back onto the agenda so that we can get some estimate, very vaguely obviously, of when things might be resolved?
Okay, thank you. So that any other thing about the calendar of meetings, or do we accept that? Sorry, Councillor Mann. Yes.
Yeah, I just had a question about this procedurally. Like, if we are going forward like this, do we stay in our roles until the next annual meeting? Is that what the procedure is?
Excuse me, in relation to the annual meeting question, as we said earlier, it's in the gift of council or in the gift of the mayor as to whether or not to consider changing that. If the council decides that it does not wish to hold an annual meeting, then the consequence of that is that the appointments which were made previously, and that's not just the mayor and the deputy mayor, but it's that the appointments to outside bodies, the appointments to committees will actually continue to run for a period, well, for as long as this council itself runs for, if you like. So either for the full 2 years, or alternatively, if you decide to have an annual meeting before the expiry of that, until that time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crawford, did you want to speak? Can you unmute yourself, please, Leslie?
Sorry, keep going to the wrong place. I just wanted to make sure that you'd actually noticed, because I did put my hand up earlier, and I put my hand up then on the system.
It
so
didn't appear. No, it didn't appear.
No. Right,
no.
Okay.
So you'll have to wave to me.
Yeah, but the only point I was going to make has been answered, which was that the Sustainability and Environment Group was not listed. It has been answered, so that's fine. But my bit was to make sure you noticed
yes,
that.
No, wave, because you haven't come up. Councillor Graham Parker, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Several members of the committee have raised the issue of the annual meeting in this discussion. Is it your intention to propose that we do hold an annual meeting during the course of the year? I mean, if that was the proposal and it came to full council, it would have my support amongst others. I'm sure that's right.
Certainly, it has been suggested to me that we should be thinking about when we have an annual meeting sometime in the year and not necessarily go on for another full year before we have the annual meeting. But I think I brought this up so when we're talking about this to see what people's views are, whether we should have an 18-month or a 2-year or whatever. What do people want? And then we can make some sort of thought about whether we bring it to as we've now decided, to a full council meeting.
Chairman, can I just observe, Councillor Barry Smith has had his hand raised for quite some time. I don't know whether you've clocked. If you look,
I can't see anything. He wasn't there.
No. If you look on the right hand side at the participants, he's using the raise a hand facility.
Ah, right. Okay.
So you need, if you can just be aware of that.
That's fine. Yes. Right. Right, so does Councillor Barry Smith wish to speak?
He'll need to unmute himself. I'm
Yes.
unable to do it for him.
Right, Councillor Barry Smith, can you unmute? Yes, he has to.
Yeah, I'm having a few problems with the sound. If I put my video on, the sound coming into me completely disappears. It goes very staccato. What was the question?
The question apparently is that you had your hand raised and wanted to speak.
I do apologise. If I did, it was because I was trying to sort out how the sound problem I have.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It's just the wrong button.
Right, the difficulty, Town Clerk, is that if I have the list of participants, because there's so many of us, it obliterates 3 people's faces, and which I think actually I'd rather see people. I think if Councillor Barry Smith wishes to speak, I think he just has to interrupt at an appropriate time and do it that way. So anyway, we're talking about annual meeting.
Thank you.
Right. We're talking about an annual meeting and what people's thoughts on the matter were. Does anybody have any comments? Councillor Graham Parker.
Yeah, just an observation. More and more council do seem to be taking the opportunity to say that we'll take a 3-year period, split it down the middle, 18 months, and that brings you back onto a May cycle in the fairest way, giving 2 mayors an equal shot at the job. Okay. I would certainly be for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harry Smith and then Councillor Moody. Councillor Harry Smith first, please.
Yeah, it seems to me that that's an obvious way forward to do 18 months. I would agree with Councillor Graham Parker that if he's not proposing it to enable the discussion to move on, I'd like to propose that we go forward with 18 months of the current mayor and then a change with an annual meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I totally support the idea. Obviously, I can't vote on it because I'm not a member of the committee. However, this is what West Devon are working towards, is the mayoralty will run till September, and then the deputy mayor takes over from September for 18 months. And it's been widely accepted. We've still got to go to full council, I think, which is next Tuesday. But it is a way forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Ursula Mann, please.
If that would allow us to change our committees as well, I would definitely be interested, and I'd like to have different experiences on council, so I'd be supportive of that as well.
Okay, thank you. I think I get the feeling that if we take the proposal by Councillor Harry Smith that we have an annual meeting, presumably we take it to council first to agree that council thinks there should be an annual meeting. So can I propose that we take that to the next council meeting to suggest that we do have an annual meeting, probably about 18 months. So we're splitting the mayoral years. So do we need to vote on that, Clerk, or do we just take that?
I would say that, I mean, we've got a couple of other things to look at. The civic ball, you've got the endorsement of the calendar of meetings, which I think there was general assent for earlier.
Yes.
And then the formal endorsement of the return of reporting to council, which I think is implicit in what's just been said. So I think what I would say is, if I'm reading the meeting correctly and there's agreement around all of those factors, I would be inclined to take that as a single consolidated motion, unless there is disagreement on one or other of those, in which case we split it out, sir.
Okay, can we just mention the civic ball? It's been proposed that this year, unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to be able to have the civic ball as usual. Any thoughts? Or Councillor Parker, please.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what I said at the, I think, the March council meeting, that if the Civic Ball is cancelled, then I would want my ticket price to go to the Mayor's charity, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harry Smith, please. Unmute, Harry, please.
Yeah, I just think that to me, from my situation, it appears sensible to not have a gathering which, to be financially viable, means that people have to sit very, very closely together. I just don't think it would be a real goer, and it wouldn't be like normal circumstances. That's just my opinion, of course. And if everybody else wants it to go ahead, then it would go ahead, but I wouldn't go.
Okay, thank you. Does Councillor Johnson want to say anything?
Thank you. I did raise my hand to show.
Again, it didn't. It's not showing, Anne, for some reason.
No, but it only goes up for a short period. You need to be looking at all the screens all the time so you can see them. But it showed on my screen that I wanted to speak.
Right.
Only to say that it was going to be, I think, on the 18th of September. I think that's too close to the present time, and I don't think it's just not going to work. So I think it needs to be cancelled.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward, please.
I'm sorry to be a pessimist, but I really don't think we're going to be out of the mire by September. We could actually be in a worse situation than we are at the moment if predictions of a second or third wave are fulfilled. And I think it would be much easier for everybody if we just take the hit and cancel the ball now.
Thank you. And Councillor Mann, please.
I would also, Jan, be happy to have my tickets go to the Mayor's charity as well. And I agree with everybody else's comments.
Okay, right, thank you. So I think there seems general agreement that we unfortunately have to cancel the Mayor's Ball this year. It's just not safe to do it. So let's accept that. I think that's really it. So shall we just basically move everything forward? We accept the calendar of meetings. We're going to bring up the idea of an 18-month type annual meeting to the next council meeting. That's really it, and the rest, the statutory reporting, etc., we're just going to agree to. Is everybody in agreement with that, please? Please show. That's fine. Okay, thank you. Right, next, coronavirus health and safety risk management. Over to the town clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report really setting the scene in relation to where we find ourselves, seeking to set out the principles and the practices which, as officers, we're recommending need to be adopted for safe operations going and operating arrangements going forward as we have more staff coming back into a workplace. Clearly, we will keep as many staff as can work from home at home going forwards, but as we look to reopening facilities and providing more facilities in and around the community, then we need to have these arrangements in place, and also for our stakeholders. So it's partly about that. It's also about recognising that coronavirus represents an existential risk. And whilst your existing risk register in part probably contains elements which cover the whole of the coronavirus risk, we are recommending that you actually adopt a new risk which pulls all of those diverse elements together, recognising that potentially because of the health impact, the reputational impacts, the financial impacts, all those things, that we need to acknowledge that this is something which needs to be treated independently and discreetly and receive the highest priority. So it's really seeking your endorsement of the approach, and then any comments or views as to where other improvements or adjustments can appropriately be made. I would also just ask if, when members have had an opportunity to speak, if you could go to the General Manager, because he is our qualified health and safety lead for the organisation, just to see whether there's any points he would wish to add after the member debate, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harry Smith, please. Can you unmute yourself, Harry, please? Thank you.
Yeah, it didn't work the first time. Yeah, it's good to see the praise being heaped on our general manager throughout this report. It's absolutely glowing. I think it's right that we do this, because having read the current document, although, as a town clerk said, it probably covers most of it, I think it's better to be in the form that's contained within the report. So I think we should make those changes. And as far as some of the passing on of information and guidance, I know that it says, and the general manager can respond to this, that each manager within the organization needs to identify which parts of the guidance are applicable to their area, and then also distill those elements applicable to all of those council working practices. How are we physically going about that at the moment?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment before we ask the General Manager? Councillor Parker, please. Councillor.
Just for information, if I may, please, Wayne. I'm not familiar with our risk register. I'm sorry, I should be. But do we use a traffic light system where if effectively you record the risks, you record what you've done to mitigate the risk, and then evaluate whether the risk is red or amber or green, i.e. serious, moderate or dealt with. Is that how we deal with it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ewings, then Councillor Johnson.
Can I just ask on item 2.9 on page 6, little g, it says whether the lockdown has introduced other risks, e.g. has routine Legionella testing, alarm testing or machinery servicing lapsed. Does that mean that the testing has not been being done weekly during lockdown, or are we going to have to arrange for, is this an annual testing that's not been able to be carried out, which is servicing lapped? I'm just a bit confused as to which that means.
If I can just comment on that particular point, what the report is trying to identify is that whilst coronavirus itself is a discrete and major risk, the inactivity within organisations or the inability to undertake some other important tasks, and that's just an example, may mean that there are consequential risks which arise. And what that's doing is flagging both to members and to officers that they need to have a look at all of the things which ordinarily would be done in the normal course of events, make an assessment of those things and whether or not they have been done, and if not, what the impact would be if we continue to fail to do it. I think Legionella is a good example. If you fail to do that and you have a problem, then you've got a strict liability in relation to it. So all it's doing is saying, here's an example, but think across your area of activity and what hasn't been done that normally would have, and what the consequences would be if we fail to acknowledge that, because there's a real danger we focus on coronavirus and we don't actually then address the consequential risks.
I think what I'm more driving at though, Mr. Town Clerk, is, for example, down at Crowndale, we have done the Legionella testing the water every single week. Somebody has gone into the building, the same person has gone into the building every week and run the normal alarm tests and the Legionella testing. So we have complied. Now we have, enough managers that can go one into each of those buildings and have been responsible to do that. I'm just wondering if we haven't done any of it, or where you're quite going.
I think the General Manager would like to speak there. Can we ask him? And then we'll come to Councillor Johnson.
Trying to cover off all your questions, obviously in relation to any of our statutory obligations or building inspections, etc. All of those have been carried out in a timely manner. We have arranged for the necessary servicing engineers to come in when they've been available to come into the buildings. So we're on top of everything in relation to what is required in relation to our buildings. The only thing that we've had a temporary delay on is in relation to MOTs, because there was a 6-month extension on MOTs for our vehicles. So with regards to everything else, we're on program for all of our buildings and all of our infrastructure, like lifting operations, lifting equipment regulations, etc. In relation to Councillor Parker's question, no, we don't operate the traffic light report or traffic light kind of system anymore for the risk assessments. We've taken the COVID model from the HSE, so it's very much identifying the risk and then just putting in the mitigating measures, and it's far more prescriptive, to be honest, which I think easier to follow In relation to the question from Councillor Smith, the management teams have been having regular Zoom meetings specific to the topics of risk management. All the risks have been identified in the area, some before others, clearly because some were quite critical to do at the early stages of the pandemic. Those risks have been disseminated to staff and negotiated between staff members, etc. And they're all signing up to those. We've just agreed another tranche of risk assessments for a further phased integration now that certain elements of lockdown have been sort of like lessened on the restrictions, and that tranche is being implemented this week, which will be again disseminated to staff next week. We're saying yes, the ownership is there with the individual managers, but that's in consultation with the senior managers, and then it's agreed across the board. There are some elements which are site specific, so the town hall and events manager, for example, who's leading on the cemetery, has done an individual risk assessment around the cemetery management, etc. During COVID. But when you've got aspects around cleaning, most of that, rather than having managers doing independent risk assessments for cleaning across all of our properties and buildings, we'll have a generic risk assessment which covers it with elements which are then site specific for each activity. And again, that will be disseminated with all the staff.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank Carl for this detailed report that he's written, and I guess Wayne's had quite a bit of input into it as well, and to all the staff for carrying on dealing with the health and safety of the council during what have been most challenging times. So thank you very much for that.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you very much from every one of us. We realise it's there's a lot of work still going on, which is great. Right, any other comments on this report, or are we just happy to accept it? Is there anything more you want from us, Carl? Or are you quite happy that you know what you're doing and where we're going?
I think if colleagues are happy to endorse the inclusion of the new risk as outlined and the level, and I appreciate that there is potentially some discussion. Just to Councillor Parker's point, the way in which we operate our typical risk register is on a likelihood and severity matrix, which takes you up to a maximum score of 25. There was quite a lot of soul searching in terms of how we actually scored this one. I think we've probably come out with, if you like, the most concerned level because of the nature of what it is. I think we've come in at 20, if memory serves me right. That is a major risk for us to be aware of, but I think it reflects the reality of where we are with coronavirus. So if you're happy with the inclusion of that, and you're happy with the principles and the practice being taken forward in terms of how we actually develop our emergent approach post-COVID and during COVID, then if you're happy to endorse that, I think that covers us for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is everybody happy? Please show. That's fine. Jolly good. Thank you. Next one. This is number 6, Coronavirus Health Emergency Social Fund. Again, over to the Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this report is really asking a couple of questions. I mean, first of all, for members to have the opportunity to note, and if they wish to review the awards that have been made. Going forwards, it's really suggesting a two-tiered approach in relation to the operation of the scheme. One of which, because we have been able to move fairly quickly, is to suggest that we retain the current arrangements, which would be the 3 members plus myself to be able to determine applications, but with the addition of a caveat, which is that in the event that as a group there was a failure to achieve consensus, that actually the decisions would be referred to the Budget and Policy Committee for determination. And then the one additional element which is there, which is an item 1.3b(2), is the proposal that if we find ourselves for the duration of the pandemic in a situation where an urgent decision is required which cannot be met by meetings, because as you'll appreciate, in relation to meetings, we have to give 3 clear days notice and all the work that goes with that. If we actually do have to operate in a general emergency at very short notice, that as a reserve power, you retain the existing delegation to that group of 4 people, just in case, with a report coming back then to the next meeting, either of Budget and Policy or of Council, depending on which is meeting next as appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments on that, anybody? No. Okay, I think, are we, Councillor Graham Parker, please?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the second of those points. The emergency delegation arrangements, is that just related to the social fund?
My apologies. No, that is the emergency delegation arrangements in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. If we need to operate, because as you'll appreciate, we cannot actually hold an emergency meeting of council or an emergency meeting of budget and policy at less than the statutory period of notice that the law requires. Those conditions still continue in place. So if we needed to operate in an emergency at 24, 48, 60 hours, there is currently, if we don't have that reserve power, no ability for the council to actually lawfully operate.
In that case, Chairman, can I? I'm going back to March the 20th, which switched the delegation from what I'll call the group of three and the town clerk to Budget and Policy Committee. I do think it's important to have
Am I the only one to have lost Graham Parker? No, I think, Graham, you've disappeared.
Right.
Graham, I think you've disappeared again.
I disappeared completely.
Yes, you're there, but your voice has gone. That's better. Try again, please. I think we missed most of that. We missed not.
Okay. I said I'm going back to March the 20th, where delegation. What, are people not hearing me at all?
No, you're just going fuzzy. Odd words are coming out.
That's just the way I am.
If you turn off your video for a while, usually your voice will come through better because it will use up less memory. So if you just stop your video but continue your audio, then you might be able to speak.
Okay, what I was saying is that back to March the 20th, my favourite resolution that switched the delegation from what I'll call the group of three, plus the town clerk, to the Budget and Policy Committee. I'm entirely, I continue to entirely support the need for emergency arrangements, but it does seem that since the lead committee is Budget and Policy, and three of the group of three are all members of the Budget and Policy Committee, it seems, I'm not sure what the word is, wrong, that the Vice Chairman isn't included in that group. It could be a proper subcommittee of Budget and Policy Committee acting with the delegation of BPC, but comprising, I see the town clerk shaking his head, but it does seem that it ought to include the chair and vice chair, as well as the two other members of the Budget and Policy Committee.
Okay, thank you. To the town clerk, please.
Just to clarify, now who the group is comprised of is completely a matter for members, and I understand that. But I think once you start talking about having a subcommittee, then you are tied into the notice requirements for meetings, the public access requirements for meetings, the report writing, and all the things that go with that. You will not be able to determine a matter at less than, well, 72 hours, but in practice, it's actually going to be 4 days notice. So if you have to move quickly, you cannot do it through the meeting framework. What we're suggesting, bear in mind, what we currently have is a group of 3 members who are consultees, and the legal authority cannot sit with those 3 members. It can only sit with myself as an officer. So the legal authority is with myself. I consult with the 3 members, and hopefully there's a consensus. And in the event there's a consensus, I act on it. But the decision cannot be fettered. The decision can only be an officer's decision. If you wish to have a provision which enables you to act at less than 3 to 4 days notice in the event that something urgent comes up, this is the only lawful mechanism you have. Now, if you want to increase the size of that group to 5 members or 4 members, that's not an operational issue. But if you wish to have rapid decision making at less than 4 days notice, this is the only lawful route that you have to do it. A subcommittee cannot do it because you're still bound by the legal requirements for notice of meetings and all that goes with that, sir.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Parker, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope what I'd written down is I hoped I'd said as if it were a subcommittee. All I'm saying is that it seems that since the delegated authority rests with Budget and Policy Committee, the second most senior person on Budget and Policy Committee ought properly, in my view, to be a member of that group.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments? No. Is my feeling then that we carry on for now with the same way we've done it, that basically most decisions are made by the normal committees, but if in an emergency the town clerk feels he needs to discuss it with the group of 3, then that's what we should do? Is there support for that? Yes, I think that we'll carry on with that. I think, yes. Okay.
Can I just clarify one other thing,
yes,
which I think was implicit in that? In terms of the operation specifically of the coronavirus scheme, that would continue under the that would continue as is then? So unless there was a difference of view, which would bring it before the wider membership.
I think that was my feeling, yes. Okay, right. 8 is commercial tenancy matters. Bear in mind, we have a part 2 later. Over to the town clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. What we've tried to do is to use the report to set out the position in relation to our commercial estate, recognising that there are different circumstances affecting different tenants, that some are most certainly distressed and disadvantaged more than others, but I think all find themselves in a difficult and challenging position because of coronavirus. You'll also note that we have gone as an organisation substantially further than the government's recommended practice. The government recommended that a deferment of rent be put in place for 3 months, which effectively bought people 3 months. We have, and that was one period of deferment. We have actually gone for 2 quarters of deferment for a period of 12 months and 9 months respectively. So it's dramatically further than the government's recommendation. What that's intended to do is very much to provide, on the one hand, a breathing space for tenants and an opportunity both for them and ourselves to better understand not just the nature and impact of the coronavirus pandemic, but the nature and impact of government assistance and other measures. So for example, only this week on Monday, the government's discretionary grant scheme came into play. We've only just found out that the furlough scheme is being extended, that the self-employed person scheme is being reviewed and extended. All of these things are changing. Clearly, there is an opportunity for the council when we get to the autumn, hopefully when there is some more clarity, to review what we've done and how we've done it. But I think what I would say is, having spoken to our professional advisors, we have gone further than many other commercial landlords in terms of what we've done to try and support our tenants. We've also provided signposting to them about where they can access support, both through the government operated schemes and where those actually are. And we're doing the same thing with market traders going forward. So we're doing all that we can to support them. But clearly it's a movable feast and we do need to keep the matter under review going forwards. And that's something we'll pick up in the budget round. But I would very much hope that what we've got at the moment represents something which can be seen as, and certainly from our advisors, very good practice in relation to the sector.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williamson, please. Unmute yourself, Paul.
Thank you, Clark, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. As you all probably know, I'm a director nominee from the council to the bid. I'm aware from the bid bod that there was a lack of understanding about how far the council had gone, and I've sought to clarify that. And I think as commercial landlords, which we are, we've gone a long way, and the clerk has mentioned as much about 2 quarters and whatnot. The bid also wrote to the clerk. I don't know if that letter went to council or to the 3 members who are operating as our council. It'd be nice to know that it did. Interestingly, the bid didn't see fit to copy me, the bid director, the letter, but maybe they thought it was probably better not to. I don't know why. That's an internal communications issue within the bid bod. Nevertheless, I think what we're looking at, we're staring down the barrel of, is a serious issue with potential defaults down the line with our tenants. And that reality is going to have to be factored into our financial plans as we go forward. It's all very well giving them the relief now, but it may be the case, obviously, that we never see a return back of those foregone quarters. And it might be a calculation that the council has to do to work out how it's going to respond, because it can't give selective reliefs because everyone will want one. So it's quite a complicated issue that we're facing. And
it's just been brought in. Should this be in part 2? Can I just cancel you a minute?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into any specifics. I'm just warning in general terms that we need in part 2 to take a detailed look at this issue, and we can reserve what we want to talk about for part 2. But it would be worth the public knowing that we do have an understanding about the commercial realities of renting properties to tenants, and we are in effect no different from a commercial landlord in that we face those risks. And I think the bid needs to understand that as well, because there is a view that perhaps we're not good at managing our commercial properties. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I'm sure the council is very aware of that, and I think it's right that you should say it. Yes. Anybody else anybody else wish to speak?
I think if I can, just by way of a general observation, Chairman, I think both, I know councillors and I know as officers, we are committed to being a reasonable, responsible public sector landlord. And the tests for a public sector landlord are necessarily and appropriately higher than they are for private sector landlords. And that is what we have tried to do. That is the basis upon which we seek professional advice. And that is the basis very much upon which we have acted, and we will continue to act. And I know that the council feels that very strongly as well. There are necessarily and appropriately different views within the commercial property sector, depending upon how many tenants you've got, where those tenants are, and what businesses they're in. And we understand that. Ultimately, our aim and our goal is, on the one hand, to look after and protect the interests of our tenants, and alongside that, to ensure and to maintain that Tavistock itself, as a town, as a retail centre, as a community, has a vibrant shopping centre, has a vibrant business community. And that's what we're working towards with the bid company. There may be different views within the bid company and indeed with other stakeholders, but I don't think between the officers of the bid company, this council, the borough council, and the other key stakeholders, there is anything that divides us in terms of our commitment to delivering a safe, viable, sustainable and resilient town centre for now and for the future, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, shall we move on then? Yes, I think so. 9, Tavistock Bid Company appointment of representatives. The first one is a representative to serve on the Tavistock Bid Company Recovery Planning Group, if requested, which I think it will be.
Can I just clarify, sir, we've received the details of that request, and it is a request that we appoint one councillor and one officer to work alongside the bid and West Devon Borough Council on the implementation of a town centre recovery plan. Phase 1 being social distancing and phase 2 being business and high street recovery.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, thoughts? Councillor Ewings, please.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I didn't know whether you thought it might be suitable for you to fulfil that role, as you've been very involved in what's been happening.
I certainly be very happy to do that. Yes, it would be very interesting, and I think we should be involved, very, very involved in this with everybody. We want to move forward, so yes, I'd be happy to do that. Councillor Williamson, please.
Thank you. Obviously, as the bid director from the council, I don't know whether they're asking for another member of the council or not. And I'd like to ask the question, have they actually asked us yet? Or are we still waiting?
We have been asked, and the question is a member representative, and that member representative, as I understand it, could be any member of the council, irrespective of current appointments. They're just looking for a member of the council who would be able to represent us at the member level, and then at officer level. And officer, I think what I would say to colleagues, if you're agreeable, is that at officer level, we say it will be either the town clerk or the general manager, because we both have different skill sets and expertises, and depending on the nature of the subject matter, it might be more or less appropriate for one or the other of us to be involved or engaged in different phases of the project, if that's agreeable to them and to you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crawford, please. Remember to unmute yourself, please, Leslie.
Sorry. Yes, I was just going to nominate you, Andy.
Right.
You've done quite a lot, and you've actually got the ball rolling on this with your letter to the town council, the Tavistock Times, to sort of look at pedestrianisation. So I think that's quite a good starting point, really. So
okay,
I'd like to nominate you.
Thank you very much. I've been nominated. Anybody else? I'm seconded, aren't I suppose? Everybody in favour? Oh, sorry, I've got to wait for Mr. Parker. Sorry, he was waving at me. I've got several now. I've got Paul Williamson. I've got Anne Johnson. So start with Graham Parker.
To say that from the point of view of a non-member of the committee, I think would be a splendid representative from the council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you. Can I remind anybody who is appointed that they take the council's view and not their own personal view as to things that happen. So they should be guided by our officers and come back to council and ask if necessary. It shouldn't be your personal view. It should be the council's view.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Councillor Williamson.
I think this decision, I accept the decision of the council, and I tender my resignation from the bid board, because clearly as a director of the bid board, I have a responsibility as a director, company director, which involves all of the duties therein, and to have another councillor appointed to a panel is probably perfectly acceptable to the council. It's not acceptable to me personally, so you can I have to draft this. It wasn't a decision I wanted to come to, but I will withdraw from being a bid director as a consequence of this resolution.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ewings.
So can I just get this straight with Councillor Williamson? They're not asking for an extra councillor on top of their bid bod? Because I understood this, that it was going to be an extra new person, not saying Councillor Williamson must leave. You know, he is a member and he is, as he correctly says, a company director. This person that they're looking for, I didn't think was going to be a company director. They're going to be somebody who's just going to be getting forward with taking the town forward as it goes, not somebody who's going to go to the monthly bid bod meetings. Councillor Williamson, have I got that completely all wrong?
The recovery plan is discussed at board level routinely. It is a standing agenda item, albeit a new one, and obviously the principal effort of the bid bod at the moment, and I think probably the only effort of the bid bod at the moment. It is integral to what we do as a board. To interpose another member of council will cause more noise and probably skew decision making if I'm there as well, because we would have effectively two votes or 2 points of view or 2 contributions to the discussion against those of the town. I think the town itself, the town traders who observe the bid board, will think that the council is introducing more firepower onto the board, and that may be the case, and therefore I don't want to see that happen, and therefore it is the only decision I can take is to withdraw from being a board member if council wants to go down that route. Now, council's entitled to do that, and frankly, I've got other things to do outside of this. So we are meeting weekly at the moment, and there's another meeting tomorrow night by Zoom going forward for the next 5 weeks as we're at situation critical. So that's the situation. I don't see any alternative but to step back if you want to go down this route.
Do you, Councillor Mann, please?
Councillor Williamson, I'm really upset to hear that. I guess from my perspective, I sort of saw your role on the bid bot as being, as a director, as being almost a preceding call on your time, and therefore I would have thought you had a different role in the sense that you're actually making the decisions as a director, whereas this is just a representative to be on a planning group, which I think is a really different described activity. To me, it sounds like they need somebody to walk around with them and say, yes, that sounds like a good, like somebody who's going to be an idea person and say, yes, we'll support that as a council, not somebody who's making the kind of critical decisions that you've been making for the bid. And I think it would be a really huge loss for the council if you were to step off of the bid. I think you have incredible experience, and you are probably the best placed to have that kind of commercial experience. And I really wouldn't want that to be the result of this decision at all.
No. Can I just put in my bit here? I mean, I feel exactly the same as Councillor Mann. I see you as one of the business people running the business of bid. I would see myself, as I assume other representatives will be, as just people who are concerned about getting the town going again and are hoping they can put some ideas in. But I certainly wouldn't see in any way that I'm competing with you. You're a businessman, and you're there in bid as part of the business of the town. I think it'd be very sad if you resigned. Can Councillor Crawford have a word, please?
Sorry. Yes, I would agree, because I was here listening to what Councillor Ewings was saying. And yeah, I saw them as quite separate, and I think they could be quite complementary, actually. One with bringing the business experience, and Councillor Williamson brings all of the history with it as well. So it's just about adding a new dimension in quite unusual times. We're in a position of rebuilding after crisis, and it's going to take quite a lot of energy and expertise to do that. And I'm sure, Councillor Williamson, you've got your own business to give your energy to, so I respect that bit. I just don't see why the two can't go in tandem and support each other rather than, be one or the other. And maybe the voting system could be discussed in terms of that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Councillor Johnson, and then Councillor Virginia Parker, please.
Thank you. I think it would be a massive shame if Councillor Williamson wasn't our representative on the bid board. I think he's worked very, very hard to build bridges and to develop the relationship that the council has with the bid. And I think it would be a great loss if he wasn't there. I really do. I'd be very sad.
Councillor Virginia Parker, please.
Yes, I just wanted to reinforce what Leslie and Mandy said, Councillor Ewings and Councillor Crawford, in respect of this being a two heads are better than one, an extra set of thinking, an extra perspective on, as Leslie said, a difficult situation, which is hopefully temporary and won't be a permanent company director position, simply a consultative group to talk to the company directors about how to go forward. So I think it's a shame to hold, there's a sense to me that, we're being asked to make a choice, and I don't think there should be a choice on this. I think it's complementary, and as I said, two heads being better than one, and consulting with the rest of the council obviously is an important part of this.
Does the, sorry, Councillor Ward, please. Then I wondered if the clerk wants to have a thought on the matter. Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I want to fully support Councillor Williamson's place on the bid bod. He is a businessman, active in the town. He therefore has that credibility, which I think a number of us who have other backgrounds wouldn't have in that same position. So I would be very sorry to see Councillor Williamson standing down. My second thought is that, is it appropriate for this committee to make this decision? Although the council is well represented this evening, there are council members who are not taking part in the discussion, and for all I know, they may or may not be interested in stepping into this role themselves. So it seems to me the most we should be doing is making a referral, a recommendation to council, but that the final decision should be taken at council. Now, I don't know what the rest of you think about that, but that's just the way I see it going. I don't think we should be making that decision this evening. I think a bit of cooling off time is needed.
Councillor Williamson.
I'm grateful for Councillor Ward's comments, and I would put a stay on what I just said. I would also say I'm not putting a gun to the council's head by giving you an alternative of one or the other, or whatever it turns out to be. So I'll wait to see what and hear what full council says when the time comes, and I'll reserve my decision about being a bid bod director till then, if that's all right.
Chairman, if I may, just on a solely procedural point, all subject because of the decision that was made at agenda item 4 today, all of the decisions in inverted commas made tonight are in fact recommendations to council, so none will actually take effect until such time as the council meeting has taken place, sir.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I really feel it very sad that we're basically looking as though it's a competition, and I don't think it really should not be a competition. I think we have we can both be on, and that should be very useful, I think, to the town as a whole. I don't think it is a competition. What do people think? Do we have to wait to council? The recovery, I mean, you know, periods are the problem is here now. Councillor Ewings, please.
I was just going to say that I've just looked at the calendar of meetings, and the full council is not due to be held until the 23rd of June. I wondered, you know, from my understanding of when I've been reading Jana's business reports and everything that she's writing, that I thought this was an imminent in about getting the town open. This isn't, to me, the way I read it, and as I first said, that I don't see it pitting, you know, one councillor versus another. I think it is about, you know, getting the town opened, how we start to get it opened, and everything else. And if we leave it until the 23rd of June, you know, that's 3 weeks away. You know, are we then leaving ourselves wide open that, you know, the council can't make a decision? You know, so it's one of those scenarios again. I just think it's almost now just putting us in a really awkward decision. And if we could respectfully ask, if Paul finds out what's happening tomorrow night when he has his bid meeting, and then, you know, according to what he finds out, if it's okay if the town council waits until the 23rd and, you know, whatever days after that for a decision to be made, you know, as to what's going to happen. Because 3 weeks at the moment is a very long time in coronavirus. You know, so I just think we need to just draw back a little, have a little perspective, let Paul find out exactly what's happening tomorrow night, and whether he speaks to Jana or the new bid chairman, and just to clarify what's being asked for, what's going on, because we're also being asked for an officer as well. We've not had an officer before on the board, so that's where I really see it as two completely different roles.
Chairman, I think I just need to clarify a couple of points. This is not about a board member. No. This is about someone to operate on that team. The officer representative is not on the board. They would be operating on that team and on operational matters. And in the normal way, for emergency action, and I should stress for emergency action such as we are here. Councillor Ewings makes a perfectly valid point, but what we would do in those situations is, given the fact that there is so far only one nominee from this meeting, for any activities which took place before any formal decision of council, we would notify the bid board that it was a provisional nomination and subject to ratification, but both at officer and member level, that clearly we would participate on that basis going forwards if they were happy for that to be the case, because you're quite right. And if when we finish this item, Chairman, before we move on to the next one, I would like to just give members an update in relation to some correspondence, which I know you will have seen earlier on today from myself, following a conversation with the bid manager on a related matter, which I think is where time very much is of the essence, if that's agreeable.
I think so. Okay, thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Harry Smith, I've got Paul Williamson, and I've got Councillor Moody. So Harry Smith first, please.
Yeah, there can't be any doubt that any decisions tonight are recommendations to council, because that's how it works. But what the town clerk has actually pointed out is that there's an interim period there where, if bid are prepared to accept that situation going forward, that a decision will be taken, some decision will be taken on the 23rd. Surely we can work on that basis.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Shall we have Councillor Moody first and then go to Councillor Williamson, please?
Just for clarification, Chair, on the report it says after a comma, if required. Could you just explain what that?
If requested, you mean? Well, I think
if requested.
We have been requested now. It has been requested.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that has happened. Yes.
It's not a floating.
No. I mean, I have seen correspondence over the weeks from Jana, the bid secretary, and basically they are wanting to get people involved with how, not just councils, but other people involved in trying to move the town forward.
And also, just before I finish, is that if we wait until the 23rd, the lockdown is being removed for retail premises on the 15th. So,
yes.
Indeed.
Councillor Williamson, please.
I think what's been discussed seems sensible. If it is the recovery planning room, not the board, fine. I can live with that. I think it would be too long with 3 weeks out from a council meeting to kick the can down the road till then. So whatever decision you make tonight, I will live with. I'll take a view about my position on the board as we go into the recovery planning, whether I'm still needed. Whether it's causing difficulties or whatever, I can judge that later as we gain experience of developing the recovery plan. There is a meeting tonight, next week, the following week, every Wednesday by Zoom. So we are working as a board on that, and I'll report back when the time comes, probably straight to the mayor and the clerk as our leader, and then she can decide what she does with what I have to say. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williamson. Right, I think then, so I've been nominated basically as an interim thing until the council meeting decides one way or the other what we're going to do. But I must say my feeling of all the understanding I got from Jana is that, you know, one of the problems, we've got to get involved in this now. If bid is saying, can the town council be involved in some way, then I go basically as a member of the town council just to show that we're interested and we want to move forward. So I'm the only nomination. So can I be, sorry, I think Mr. Southall wants to speak to us. Wayne?
I will just clarify the point. We are already engaged. Your officers are engaged at different levels. So you've clearly got the town clerk who's advising the bid manager strategically, and obviously myself, who's had several meetings with Jana operationally around the implementation of this. So I just think it's important that we get the message across that the town council are engaged, have been engaged for weeks prior to this discussion, and will be engaged going forward. It's just important to get that message out there.
Yeah, I think absolutely, yes. So that's right. You trust me, we have. So are people in favour of me for the interim for the next 3 weeks until the full council meeting? If you are, please show. Any, but that's, have we got some against? I think we need, I think because we need to be careful here because we can only have votes from members of the committee. So I'm getting a reverberation in my ear. Is somebody turned on that shouldn't be? Right. So can we have those in favour of me as the only nomination being the representative for the next 3 weeks who are members of the Business and Policy Committee, please show. I've got 4 there. Is that your agreement, Town Clerk?
Yes.
And do I vote? Yeah.
If you so wish.
Yes, I'll vote as well. So that's 5. So who is on the committee is now against this appointment of me for 3 weeks?
Well, members may choose to abstain, of course, as opposed to being against necessarily.
Leslie, is Leslie against me or does she want to speak?
Oh, I just want to say, in terms of members of the committee, Councillor Williamson is the deputy, the vice chairman of this committee, and he's not voting. So
no, well, he might vote against. We haven't had the vote against yet. So Leslie, right? So voting against first of all, and then we'll have abstentions. So anybody voting against me doing this interim job for 3 weeks?
Chairman, can I suggest that following the sort of, because this is a more difficult decision, that we actually follow the approach which we agreed beforehand, whereby we said we would do a roll call.
Yes.
So
okay.
Each member either indicates they are in favour, they are against, or they abstain in relation to this.
Right. Okay, then. So each member of the committee. So, Councillor Johnson, are you for me or for me doing this 3-week job or against?
I've been out of the meeting. My internet collapsed. I don't know where we are. Sorry. Carry on.
Right. Shall we carry on for now and see? So you're an abstention. Councillor Harry Smith, for or against?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Crawford, for or against?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Amanda Ewings, for or against? Sorry, I didn't. For or against? For, thank you. Councillor Paul Ward, for or against, please?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Williamson, for or against, please?
I should abstain, having said everything I have said.
Okay, thank you. So what is the vote, please, Councillor Clark? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, and then yourself. Your vote, I'm assuming,
I'm
is
voting
for yourself.
for.
Yes. In which case we have 2 abstentions and we have 5 votes in favour. So that will go forward to council, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the second part of the Tavistock bit is 3 councillors.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt, but can I just pick up before we move on to the next item, if that's agreeable, because it very much directly relates to the discussion we've just had, and it follows on from the comments that the General Manager has made. As you know, all of you, we are 14 days out from the unlocking for non-essential retail businesses. There is in place a government scheme, the Reopening the High Street Safely Fund. That is a scheme which is administered by and through West Devon Borough Council. It is only accessible for eligible projects, and amongst other things, eligible projects are things which West Devon Borough Council or any other council in its situation, but it's not eligible, but it's not available to the county council or town and parish councils, which the borough council are already funding either in its role as a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act, or under its statutory duties as the Environmental Health Authority, or under its powers as Economic Development Authority. Now, in practice, the reason I'm raising this is we've got 14 days left. There are £49,000 available to West Devon across the whole of the borough, which can be deployed. In order to deploy that, first of all, we need to understand what it is that West Devon itself is doing under the statutory authorities I've mentioned, because they're not eligible under the scheme. Secondly, we need to know what West Devon will be applying for itself under the scheme to support its actions, because that then changes the quantum from 49,000 to such other amount. Let's just say it goes down 20,000 to 29,000. And thirdly, we need to know from West Devon what the terms of the scheme are in terms of how they intend to administer it, and what assurance they will give us that if we incur spend, that spend will itself be repatriated to us. And that's not just us as a town council, it's the bid company, which obviously is leading on this. The reason I raise this is, as I've said, we're 14 days out. I know the bid company are chasing this, but we do not have clarification on these key points. In reality, if people are going to be engaged under the fund, if we're going to be purchasing signage, if we're going to be looking at other initiatives, that has to be put in place over the course of the next week. I'm really seeking the support of those members present and the committee members above all to write an urgent letter, which I will email to the Borough Council if you're agreeable, seeking urgent clarification on this, seeking a meeting this week with them in order that we can put in place arrangements which ensure that we are able to take up the offer so far as it is appropriate for Tavistock to do so, but also to understand what West Devon is doing as part of its statutory responsibilities so that we avoid overlap and wasted effort. So I'm really seeking your approval for us to be able to proceed with that as a matter of urgency, because frankly, at this stage, if we lose a week, we've probably lost our opportunity.
I'm sure it sounds reasonable. Anybody wish to comment or disagree with that? Councillor Graham Parker. Unmute, please, Graham. Graham, can you unmute?
Just a
Thank
question. Would that discussion? I am unmuted.
No, you're no, we can hear you now. Can you
I'll turn the video off. Right. It's just a question. The discussion with West Devon, would that now include the chairman as our interim representative on the recovery planning group?
That would be a matter for the bid, because of course that is a that is an appointment to the bid. The previous meeting we had was the mayor, and clearly if the mayor was unable to attend, yes, it would include the deputy mayor from that side of things. But I would anticipate that the original meeting was the acting chief executive of West Devon Borough Council. It was the mayor, it was the leader of West Devon Borough Council and the general manager. And I would anticipate that we would be asking for something along the same lines as that. But I'm conscious that 10 days or more has passed since that original meeting, and I don't think we've received any further clarification in relation to that from West Devon. It's not rocket science, this. This is basically very straightforward stuff under the Civil Contingencies Act obligations of West Devon Borough Council, but time is absolutely of the essence here. If we lose time, we lose the opportunity to actually make a difference for our community, for our traders and for our local economy.
Thank you. Okay, so let's propose we get that letter off straight away, please, Town Clerk. Right, 8, we're on 9B now. 3 councillors to collectively complete on behalf of the council in its capacity as a bid levy payer and business operator, i.e. not as the local council, the bid business survey. So we need 3 people to do this. Any suggestions from anybody as to what we do? Is this something that the mayor and say Paul Williams and myself should do, or what? I've got Councillor Ewings and then Councillor Mann, please.
I thought this had already been carried out and the results published.
Yes,
because I've already read them, and Councillor Graham Park has asked questions about them.
This is what's so absurd, isn't it? Because how can you publish a survey, half pub, half done, and then say to people, comment? Because everybody wants to comment on the winning side. So whatever they say at the beginning of the survey, everybody will now agree with them. But that's the way they've done it. And I think they've done it presumably with the best intentions to show that people are engaged. But I still think we probably ought to reply, should we? Who else? Sorry, Councillor Mann wanted to speak.
I was just thinking that the chair of the Town and Market Hall committee for the council might have the right contacts to inform on this.
Yes. And that is whom, please? Can somebody tell me who?
Councillor Squire.
Right, sorry, Councillor Squires. He's not here to agree to it, but he may well. Should the mayor be involved? Seems sensible. And who else? Should I do it, or should Paul Williamson do? I think Paul Williamson should do it. Do you wish to do it, Paul?
Yes. I've already done it. I did it weeks ago as a beta when they were testing it, and I realise there's a lag. I think it's pretty pointless me doing it again, as I've read the report. I made some structured comments back to the bid manager about the questionnaire. To my mind, it's over and done with. Whether the rights and wrongs of it have already been aired in this meeting.
Yes.
I think it's too late, but there you go.
Okay. Yes. Yes, I think you're right. Councillor Parker. Councillor Graham Parker, please. Graham, you need to unmute.
Yeah, and I'll stop the video. Yeah, just a comment on the publication of the survey. Yes, only 50 members of or 50 respondents from a potential 280 completed that survey before it was published, which has, in my view, I agree with you, Andy, Chairman, sorry, that it spoiled the survey and spoiled the results. Having said that, I think if we have a view on the survey, then we should express it as a town council. And I was going to suggest that the obvious threesome was the chair, the vice chair, and the leader, the mayor. But if I take Councillor Williamson's view on that, I suggest that we get this over and done with fairly quickly, and it should be the chair, the mayor, and Councillor Ward as the immediate past mayor.
Yes, Councillor Williamson had his hand up again. Do you wish to speak?
Again, just to say that level of response from the bid community is typical. So, don't read anything into that. And I would support what Councillor Parker just said about those selected members doing the.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ewings, please.
Also, where it says 280 bid members, as Councillor Williamson knows, it's bid properties. A lot of the bid businesses, like the town council, are only one person, but there's loads of properties. So West Devon is another one that has quite a lot of properties, but only one voice. So actually it's not quite as bad as it seems, that 50 out of 280, because you have to bear that bit in mind as well.
Thank you for that, that's very useful. Councillor Ward, please, and then Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. When considering who should complete this survey, I wonder whether we shouldn't be encouraging one or other of our younger members to take part in this as we are looking to the future. And I would, rather than seeing myself put into that position, like to ask whether Councillor Mann or Councillor Ellis would like to take a part in this.
Councillor Mann is next to speak anyway.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I would take the survey if you want. I'm happy to do that. But I was going to mention that the Tavistock District Chamber of Commerce, which I attended recently, their breakfast morning, they are also doing a very similar worded survey, almost exactly the same. So there's an additional group of people that might be coming back with responses from a different set of businesses as well, or different type of business, which I think we should probably ask or reach out to the District Chamber of Commerce, which I can do, or I think, Chairman, you're actually the appointed representative for the council, if you reached out to Tim Randall to find out what their responses were, and if you're also going to be doing the role with bid, that would be useful to find out what their responses were, because I think at least the first 5 questions were exactly the same.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ellis, do you want to replace me with Councillor Mann and the Mayor?
I'll quite happily fill out the survey if you want, yeah.
Right, I think that would be useful, because it's a wider area of what people want and their thoughts. Okay, so can we have 3 representatives there? Will be Councillor Ellis, Councillor Mann, and the Mayor.
And if I may, Chairman, just picking up on the point that Councillor Mrs. Mann made, and it came out, the Chamber of Commerce survey actually came out after the agenda was published. But if you're agreeable as a collective, it would make sense that those members who complete the bid survey do complete the Chamber of Commerce survey as well, as I say, from the perspective of the Town Council as landlord. And that way we have consistency of approach, if that's agreeable.
Okay, that seems very good. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next one. Items for information. Council operating arrangements. Town Clerk, please. Sorry, Councillor Johnson wishes to say something.
Sorry, yes, my hand was raised when we were discussing the last item.
It's not always coming up for some reason.
Right. Can I ask, through you, please, Councillor Mann, the makeup of the Chamber of Commerce? I think that would be quite interesting, because there's an awful lot of businesses from my recollection that seem to be outside of Tavistock. I think we just need to be aware of that.
I think that's right. There definitely are, yes.
Yeah, I think it's Tavistock and district, so it definitely goes beyond the confines, and it goes all the way into Plimpton and Plymouth, and goes up onto Dartmoor, and goes to yeah, so I know there are quite a wide group of people that attend those meetings, but many of them provide services to people within Tavistock, because most of the people that seem to attend the meetings seem to be in the service industry in some fashion, either financial or electrics, things like that. So things that are not necessarily office based. They may have questions about, they might have a very different perspective than the bid, which would be, I think, useful at least.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, council operating arrangements. Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, the report is there for members' information. It's an opportunity to review what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. I hope it very much puts to rest the myth that we haven't been active during coronavirus. We most certainly have. We've offered on a number of occasions to help the local Category 1 responder. We've been delivering essential services in and around the community, including burial parks and open spaces and maintaining those. We've been working very actively with our traders, with our commercial tenants, with our concession holders, with our leaseholders, and also with the bid company. So we've been active both in terms of what we did going into lockdown. We're going to be very active coming out of lockdown, and we're currently working with traders in terms of what we can do, unlocking the pannier market in a safe and sustainable way. So this really sort of sets out, I think, the background and the context for members and for stakeholders to see in terms of where we're at, but it's also recognizing that there are some practical realities that we need to take on board, not least the fact that for as long as the government's guidance is that those who can work from home should do, we will continue to do that for those staff who can. There are some issues in terms of how we can provide safe working environments for staff, and we will only ask staff to come back when we can meet those safe working environment obligations in accordance with the guidance and in accordance with our own assessment of the risk that there is. But I think it very much sets out the position in terms of where we're at. It provides an opportunity if members have got any questions in terms of what we've done, what we're doing and how we're doing it. And what we will do as we now move into the new normal of virtual meetings is you will start to receive at your council meetings your regular reporting in the traditional way, so that you can actually see what each department is doing and how within the constraints which necessarily apply to us.
Thank you very much. Because I think it's very clear those of us who knew the work that's been going on realise there's an awful lot of work being going on. It's just there has been questions raised, but I think people are realising now that people are realising the Town Council is doing a lot of work, as are so many other groups. Any comments on this report? Councillor Parker, please.
I echo what you've just said, Chairman. You started off by saying that in opening that there's an impression that Tavistock Town Council hasn't been terribly active, particularly in the unlocking of the town centre. Now, in paragraph 2.3 of this report, it said that we're working with BID, Wayne Southall, and others have said that we have been active. The town clerk has said they've been working with West Devon Borough Council. Important meetings have been going on, and it just run through a whole series of things that we have been doing under the heading of unlocking the town centre. And yet the impression is out there that we haven't been terribly active. Can I suggest that one of the reasons that impression might be out there is that the 17 of us, apart from the 2 or 3 who have been deeply involved, the 17 of us haven't been aware of it. It hasn't figured in the weekly briefings. We haven't been told about the meetings or what's been going on or what's been agreed. We have been out of the loop, and yet we're the ones who are being asked the questions. I think the only answers that I've been able to give have been, I'm sorry, I just don't know. Now, I've been asking the questions of the town clerk and of others, and I've been able to find out what those answers are. But I do think that, and to pass those on to the people who've asked me, but I do think that our communication internally hasn't shone on this issue over the last few weeks. I mean, hopefully now it's all out in the open and we know roughly, we all know roughly what's going on, that we can keep up this a better level of internal communication. That's my only observation.
Thank you. Okay, right. Well, so on to the next item then, please. Council finances. Town clerk again, please.
This is really just a snapshot as at year end. There are some health warnings which go with it because A, obviously it is only in relation to the past financial year. B, because of the provisions which are made for the year end budget monitoring report. For example, when you look at the income figure, it looks dramatically low. Well, one of the reasons for that is because provision has been made for the loan drawdown, which hasn't yet occurred in relation to the Guildhall Gateway Centre. Essentially, what it's setting out is the position as at year end, but as all members will be aware, the challenge for us isn't where we were at last year end, it's where we're going to be going forwards. The accounts will provide us with more detailed information when they become available from our accountants. It's been a challenging process for them trying to do that wholly remotely because it's clearly a much less effective and much less efficient process in terms of managing it from that side of things. When we get to the stage where we can have a look at those, we will need to begin a discussion which is around the points which were raised earlier, not least on the one hand, income which we have completely lost. In other words, it is foregone and will never come back. On the other hand, what is the risk attached to either income which has been deferred, not materialising, or indeed the long-term business model of the council, which unlike most other councils, but not all, is predicated upon commercial income for the provision and delivery of community services. So there are some challenges going forward. We'll need to have a much more detailed discussion when we have an understanding both of the year-end accounts and also where we're at with some of our capital projects in terms of the delays and the implications associated with those. We'll need to have a discussion around the general reserve, around the earmarked reserves, and around what contingencies we need to put in place going into the budget round and the precept setting for next year in order to ensure that we're in the best possible position. We have written, or the Mayor has written to our local Member of Parliament outlining the position that councils such as we find ourselves in. We're also part of a small, I think it's 6 councils sample, which the National Association of Local Councils has commended to the Local Government Association to look at the implications and impact of on local councils of the coronavirus pandemic, because as you all appreciate, when government talks about local councils, they are talking about district councils. And I think that was made quite clear in the clarification that had to be issued by the Department of Housing, Communities and Local Government when they announced their 1.6 billion rescue package, and then about 4 local councils, and then had to come out and say, actually, none of that is going to the town and parish sector. So it's really just to flag where we're at, to give you an opportunity for a snapshot on year end, but there's much more detailed work we'll need to do when we have more information to come before you. I think what I would say is, and this, there's no reason why this shouldn't be in the public domain, you know, already we are looking at a first quarter loss of somewhere between 230 and 260,000 pounds. That is a very substantial sum of money for the council to actually be able to bear. Some of that is deferred, but over half of it is not deferred. That is a loss. So there are going to be some difficult decisions to be made. And I think it's only fair that members are aware of that going forwards. And of course, that the community is aware that those decisions are going to have to be made on their behalf in due course. Happy to pick up any questions we can.
Thank you, Town Clerk. It's a lot of money. Any questions? Okay, let's move on. Capital projects, an oral report, please. General Manager, I assume.
Just give you an update that obviously RM Builders made the decision to suspend both contracts, the Public Realm and the Guildhall Gateway project at the appropriate time based on government guidance. We've had several meetings around reinstating the contracts. RM Builders started back on site last Thursday with all health and safety measures implemented, primarily focusing on the Public Realm, with a skeleton crew operating externally on the Guildhall Gateway Centre at this stage. Work should pick up a little bit more around the Guildhall Gateway project, around the amount of people on site, because as of next week, they'll have more subcontractors coming back to site. Obviously, the implications of government guidance and social distancing will inevitably mean that there will be an impact on both contracts with regards to programme length. And, you know, that isn't going to change for the foreseeable future. We've got a Zoom meeting, a capital meeting tomorrow to discuss next steps with the contract for both contracts, of which your nominated councillor representatives, which are Councillor Smith and Councillor Ward, have been invited to that meeting. So hopefully from that meeting, we'll be able to provide you a little bit more information around progress over the next month or so.
Good. Thank you very much. Any questions, anybody, or comments? Yes, Councillor Mann, please.
Just wondered if you had been able to get the stone that was from China.
As of last week, we were advised that the granite was in the UK. So yeah, positive news. So it should be on site within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Okay, nobody else, right? Let's move on, please. Unlocking the lockdown to receive for information. I've got this basically in the agenda just to give people a chance to talk about any thoughts they wanted about how Tavistock is going to recover. So there's no sort of particular agenda item that anything specific. It's just if anybody wants to say anything. You know, I wrote my article to see if whether people in the Tavistock Times were interested in what was going on, and the comments were quite positive that people like the idea of doing something on Friday and Saturday evenings. But it was very open and nothing's been decided. It's absolutely just ideas. So if anybody wants to say anything about this, please do so. Councillor Crawford, please.
Yeah, the only point that I wanted to make was about public toilets, which already has been raised. But it seems to me quite important that we make sure that we get public toilets open. I mean, I don't know what the government's sort of agenda is on that, or how we actually move that forward. But I can't see people wanting to come into towns when they don't have all the facilities open. So I don't see any reference in this to it. So I just wanted to make sure that that was on the agenda, really.
Yeah, good. Anything else that anybody wants to say? Councillor Parker. Unmute, Graham.
Sorry. Yeah, looking at agenda item 13A, the bid recovery plan. It's a good run through the issues. It's a good run through the questions that have to be asked. It's a good run through the impediments that have to be overcome. So from that point of view, it's a good report. It's what in my business I would have called a scoping report. And I noticed that it's over a month old. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see it's dated the 1st of May. So it must even have been written in the week before that. So it's probably 5 weeks old. I had a quick chat with Jana yesterday, and she said, yes, it is old, and yes, it is out of date, and there's a new report that's about to be issued. She said that she was going to try and get it to you today, Town Clerk. Did we manage to receive it? And if so, could it be circulated?
I've had a conversation with her, and I've agreed that as soon as we receive it, I will circulate it, and I would anticipate that that will be within the next 24 hours.
Thank you.
That's great.
Okay, Councillor Williamson, please.
Just to update, I think the report we've got is there's a lag. Obviously, it's a live document. It's been recirculating through the board. All the board members have made comments. I've made comments. I think, as Councillor Parker said, at that stage it was a scoping report. We hadn't settled on the 5 ingredients or however many ingredients we were going to thrust for as a bid bod. We can't do everything, so there was going to be a sifting and prioritizing process within bid bod as to what the big items were. And I'd agree with Councillor Ewings about toilets. They need to be in there somewhere, even if it's not within the bid ambit to deal with. They're central to the amenity of visiting any place, and the consequences of not having them has been seen in other places recently. So I think there is an awareness of that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll see as things go forward. Schedule of delegated decisions to the Town Clerk, please.
Really just, we've got the reference there to the point on the website, an opportunity if members have any comments that they wish to feed back either to any of the group of 4 who've been a party to those, otherwise for information only, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Urgent business, the only thing I've got here is the Mayor wants to talk a little bit about Ian Harley, who's a gentleman who ran the radios for many, many years for Goose Fair. The Mayor, please.
Thank you. Sadly, recently, Ian Harley passed away. He had been ill for a period of time. He wasn't well enough to attend the last Goose Fair lunch, which was a great shame. He was 50 years a member of the West Devon Raynet group, and he'd assisted with Goose Fair for 40 years, and he was the group controller of West Devon Raynet for 40 years. So I think it's a great shame that he's passed away, obviously, and he was a great friend to the town council and assisted with Goose Fair. Was a considerable input to Goose Fair activities. So if it's your wish, I can write to his family, if Wayne can provide me with the contact details, if that's your wish.
I'm sure that would be the council's wish, yes, to say thank you very much for all the years he's helped the town. It's a long time, isn't it? Right, we now basically, that is the end of part 1 of the meeting. So we will end the meeting here. We then will basically reconvene in about 10 minutes. If on your original email that you got from the Assistant Town Clerk, the second bit should give you the second Zoom meeting, and you join just like this meeting that you've had. So back please in 10 minutes and everybody can have a stretch because this has gone on a long time as we thought it might be. Okay, so see everybody in 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Thank you.